So these are occasions when I really, Jesus is very endearing to me in situations like this. He's trying to. I have said it before. Jesus really does. He likes the Pharisees. He's just frustrated with them. And that's why he's frustrated with them, because he likes them so much. And he's like, you guys are missing the point. And as he's talking to the Pharisees, the scribes are like feeling a little left out, but they're also feeling a little hurt, a little like the meme offended them. And so they're like, wait a minute, Jesus, by saying this, you offended us too. And Jesus is like, you know what? Oh gosh, guys, you're right. Woe to you too. You feel better? You feel better about life, do you now? So he's trying to, what he's doing here really is, in a sense, what Paul is encouraging the Galatians to do. So we'll bounce back and forth between these readings here. But what Jesus is saying to the Pharisees here is that you're paying attention to one thing and you're ignoring another, but you should be doing both, right? We've been talking an awful lot about the law. And Paul's condemnation of the law. This is exactly why Paul spends the time that he does condemning the law, because the Pharisees are saying, I'm following all the prescripts. I don't actually need to love God. I'm doing the things. I'm paying my tithe. I'm saying my prayers. Doesn't really matter to who, but I'm doing them. Right? So I'm doing all the things. I'm checking all the boxes. I must therefore be righteous because I'm looking for righteousness from the law. And I'm doing all the things that the law are requiring me to do. And this is where Paul, with Jesus here, is saying, you're missing the point. Jesus is saying, woe to you, Pharisees. Paul is saying, you stupid Galatians. Why are you doing this? Who did you hear this from? Right? And we have to look at ourselves regularly to evaluate whether or not this is true for us in the present moment as well. You pay tithes of mint and rue and every other garden herb, but you pay no attention to judgment and to the love of God. In the church today, there are two very distinct factions, and they seem to be at odds with one another, and they ought not be. There's a sense where it can be a matter of emphasis, but it has become a matter of exclusion. Here, the scribes and Pharisees are excluding judgment and love of God for the sake of following the law. But it doesn't need to be that way, as Jesus is saying. He says you should do the one without overlooking the other. And in the church today, there seems to be these two camps. And the one camp is morality and liturgical attentiveness, liturgical beauty. And on the other is inclusion and openness and welcome and loosey-goosey, right? The thing is, guys, these things ought not be at odds with one another. Right? The side here that says we've got to pay attention to the poor, we've got to feed the hungry, we've got to clothe the naked, we've got to give water to the thirsty, we've got to bury the dead. Although this side doesn't say bury the dead, they say burn them all, right? And then on the other side, they say we need to have a beautiful place to offer worship to God. We need to follow the rubrics of the church because it's not my prayer, it's the church's prayer that I'm joining into in the liturgy. We need to have a beautiful church, and we need to hold ourselves to a high moral standard so that we don't offend God, or hurt our neighbor, but that we live in a pleasing manner according to God's divine law. Ought not these things be held together in one person? Can't they be? Right? And yet, because of the emphasis of the one and the fear of excluding the other, we get into these camps about this. Oh, I go to this parish because of this, or I go to this parish because of this, or I go to this parish because they don't do X, Y, or Z. Right? And we get into these camps. And this is where Paul comes in and he says, Here, let me tell you the works of the flesh. They're obvious, right? Immorality, impurity, licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, rivalry, jealousy, outbursts of fury, acts of selfishness, dissension, factions, occasions of envy, drinking bouts, orgies, and the like. Right? because they're not directed, because this is the deterioration of a human person who is seeking after things according to the priority of the flesh. Right? A person who seeks things after the priority of the Spirit looks very different, but they're the same things. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but this whole list that he gives, that he's not saying don't do any of those things that tend towards immorality. He's not saying, in the past people have been inclined to say something like, impurity is a work of the flesh, so we must never have sex ever, right? That was kind of like the thing, like sex is bad across the board, because look here, work of the flesh is impurity, right? But what the fruit is, though, is chastity. It's not abstinence. The fruit of the Spirit is not abstinence, it's chastity. What you see is when the Spirit impregnates these things that Paul says become dangerous if we follow the work of the flesh, they become noble, right? Instead of outbursts of anger, patience. Instead of impurity and licentiousness, chastity. Instead of dissension, let's see here. Instead of dissension and factions, faithfulness, right? So what Paul is saying is that we're like family's a good thing, right? But when it turns into the Hatfields and the McCoys, it becomes a bad thing, right? Family's a wonderful thing. When it turns into tribal feuds and just one generation of another of each other killing each other, that's a bad thing, right? And so Paul is saying, look, all of the good things that it is to be a human being, when you pursue goals according to the flesh, you're going to deteriorate. You're going to turn into this barbarian, and you're going to become these things. But when you pursue the things that are good in humanity, in the Spirit, you become noble and you become great. Right? You start to bear the fruits of the Spirit: generosity, kindness, peace, joy, love, self-control, gentleness. Self-control here is what we refer to when we say chastity, right? This is essentially what, and I already quoted this once this week, this is essentially what St. Augustine means when he says, love and then do what you want. Right? If you're living by the Spirit, if you're living governed by charity, you won't go wrong. Who wants to bridle patience? Who wants to bridle gentleness? Who wants to bridle generosity? Who wants to bridle chastity? No one. You're already there. You've got it great. If you make decisions based on these things, you cannot go wrong. You don't need a law to govern those things. But if you're immature enough to live your life driven by the passions of the flesh, seeking worldly things, seeking comfort, seeking luxury, then you must have a law, because otherwise you will deteriorate. You'll start to slowly, or perhaps quickly, fall into these vices, right? But Jesus doesn't want us to avoid the vices simply because some law tells us to. That's what we call white-knuckling it. That means that there has not been an internal transformation, an interior transformation, which is why Jesus calls the Pharisees whitewashed tombs. Because on the outside they're following the law, but inside they're frantic and they're struggling and they're fighting against their passions because they haven't changed inside, in the depths of who they are. Right? Did not God, I think Jesus says yesterday in the gospel, did not the maker of the outside also make the inside? But as to what is within, give alms, and behold, everything will be clean for you. There must be an interior transformation, an interior rejuvenation that happens in a place in us that is so deep that the law cannot get there. The law is insufficient for changing the heart. Right? Only an encounter with the Word can truly change the disposition of the heart. That our desires, our deepest desires, are no longer for carnal pleasure. Our deepest desire is not for some twisted perversion of sexuality. Our deepest desire is no longer for the domination of our rivals and to stand upon the hill of the skulls of our vanquished foes. That our deepest desires are not about disassociating from reality because life is hard by drinking or orgies. That our deepest desires are not twisted in this manner, but that our deepest desires are renewed, reordered by an encounter with Christ, so that what we actually desire is peacefulness. We desire the sweet nectar of that fruit of the Spirit that is peacefulness. We desire the sweet nectar of the fruit of the Spirit, which is joy and generosity. Man, I love being joyful, and I would give up anything to be joyful. I don't need stuff. If not having stuff would make me joyful, take it all. Right? I want to be kind. I love being kind. Nothing makes me happier than being kind. And if I only had a penny left to give and an opportunity provided itself to give that penny out of kindness, I would do it because I love being kind. That we're driven. The Spirit compels us. We're driven in the depths of who we are to pursue those noble things. And it's not just a matter of white-knuckling it and saying, oh, I have to give at least 10% to tithe to the church or I'm doing something wrong. Fine. You're not really doing anything great there. Something good is happening because the material needs of the church have to be met. Something good is happening, but you're not doing the good thing. The law does not share credit. The law does not share reward. If you just obey the law, you're not there's no merit in that for you. Right? So a Christian transcends the law. And so again here now, Jesus his warning to the Pharisees and to the scribes takes on a new meaning. You pay tithes of mint and rue and every other herb, and that's a good thing. You need to do that because that delights me. Don't do it because there's a law. Do it because it pleases me. Right? Do it because you love me and you're in a relationship with me and you're my lover and I'm your lover and you want to do those nice little cutesy things for the ones that you love. So pay tithes of mint and rue and every other. That's wonderful. But use right judgment and spend time in love with God. Do that too. And to the scholars, woe to you scholars of the law, you impose on people burdens too hard to carry. Like our legislature, you know how they just make up laws sometimes just to justify the fact that they're there? It's like, we're getting paid. People are we've got this position of power. I guess we should make some laws just so that people know that we're needed. And so they just kind of like make up laws. Have you ever looked at our legal books? Not only are they voluminous? How do you say that word? Voluminous. But they're also indecipherable, right? They do that to show that they're needed. They do that so that we need them. It doesn't have to be that way. We don't need lawyers the way we use lawyers today. You know why we need lawyers today? Because they made up their own vocabulary and nobody else knows what it is. That's why. That's why we need lawyers, right? And if there are any lawyers out there, I'm not talking about lawyers in particular, but in general, right? And Jesus is saying here, woe to you scholars. You're just like making up interpretations of the law just so that like you look smart. Quit doing that because it affects people's lives. And it's wrong. It's just not that complicated. It doesn't need to be that complicated. So cut it out. Right? And this is what he's getting at, right? So for our own examination, to make sure that we are where the Lord wants us to be, we have to ask ourselves, first of all, where's my heart? Not just what am I doing? I go to daily mass, I do all the things. Don't ask that. Are you peaceful when you sit down with the Lord? Right? Do you crave time with the Lord? Do you crave silence? Do you crave solitude with God? Do you delight in the things that impoverish you in this world? Do you delight in the things that make you poor in this world? Do you love to give money away? Do you love to give away your time? Do you love to counsel and to console and to advise and to admonish? Do you love those things? Right? And when you do you then put them into practice for the good of others and for the glory of God? Right? If we can do an examine of our own selves that sort of clears those bars, we don't have to worry about anything else, because we're going to be doing everything be doing everything Jesus wants us to do exactly the way Jesus wants us to do them.